Okay, everybody, so my hair's doing its best Cyberpunk 2077 impression. It's a disheveled mess, but you can really see the potential in it. So I thought today it would be thematically on point that with Cyberpunk 2077's biggest update yet, I did not style my hair. Now, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to put a reminder out there, be good to one another, okay? Be nice. Sometimes in these Cyberpunk videos, it gets overly toxic in the comments, not even towards me, but just in general. So if you see someone going, this sucks, you suck, everything sucks, wish them a good day. Be the positive change you want to see in the world. And with that, like I said, we have the biggest update yet for Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, okay. Oh, there's more. Okay. Enough. Yeah, so there's a lot. So, yeah, we're not going to go through, obviously, every single bit of it, but I sat down off camera and read through all of these individually to see if there were any hidden changes amidst the, 500 plus in there that were worth talking about. And there were some that a lot of people have been complaining about, myself included, throughout my experience with the game that were addressed, but they were just buried in a mess of notes. So hopefully down the line, Projekt Red figures out a better organization system for all of these instead of just word vomiting a ton of them and putting them under 5 categories. But yeah, a lot of big changes here for Cyberpunk 2077 from the consoles to PC. There's a Stadia patch coming out next week for all 3 of you. So with that, let's get into what I think are some of the highlights. Now, earlier last week, we talked about some fixes coming to Cyberpunk 2077, and a lot of people were upset because it was 5 of them, and those folks went, well, that's really disappointing. This was supposed to be a big patch. And I said, this is more like the highlights, but to me, those weren't even the highlights. So they start off in the gameplay section relisting all of those. The NCPD spawn radius for when the player commits a crime has been increased, steering sensitivity slider added, the steering code has been adjusted so it works better in high and low frame rates. There's an unstuck mechanic now, and the driving model tune revisions to some vehicles will improve the steering. So if you watched that previous video, a lot of this will be already familiar to you. So I gotta be honest, I don't really know what the plan is for Projekt Red in the terms of how they're gonna roll out patch notes, where they're gonna do those highlights first and then this big word vomit of patches. But all I have to say is that the highlights really didn't, to me, put a spotlight on what I think are some of the more major changes coming to the game and ones that more people were complaining about outside of the NCPD. I complained a lot about the driving, but we'll see in due time. I'm still open to them saying, hey, let's just have some fun with the patch highlights before we get into the actual patch notes themselves. And especially when you have this many, it makes sense to have a highlights version. But you'll see as we go through this video, some things that should have been highlighted aren't there. So let's get into it. Clothing vendors now sell items more suitable for the location. Cat food needed to adopt nibbles can now be bought at several food shops around Night City. The item for resetting perk points, the Tabula Rasa, can now be bought at a reduced price and reduce the amount of higher quality crafting components needed to craft iconic items. I don't know how many of you watch my older Cyberpunk guides and builds and all that stuff, but when I was directing people, the shops weren't super accurate on where you could go because they'd be stocking in different items per location. So to make them more region friendly per the game world not only makes sense in-game in immersion, but also it's just better to find things. What I really like here, though, is the reduced high-quality crafting components. This is not going to be a major game changer for anybody, but the crafting system in Cyberpunk 2077 sucked. It just was not that good. Just in the way it was implemented. I don't mind a crafting system. I know it's pretty common in most games nowadays. I don't mind crafting. It's just really that the way they handled it, from its balancing to mass breaking down items, just there was a lot that wasn't fine-tuned with it, and you're going to see throughout this patch a lot of that has been reworked. But there's also updates to prices and damage in-game. Gorilla Arms damage has been increased by 20%, reduced prices of Kiroshi Optics fragment recipes, and also reduced the power of revolver-wielding NPCs. Very specific. The one I wanted to point out here is that Gorilla Arms are a little bit better. I messed around with those in my playthrough. They are fun. they are really fun to use because you just pulverize your enemy. So 20% boost on those. Little meta tweak there. So I'm not going to read all this right now, but as you can see on screen, there are a gigantic amount of quest fixes. This is obviously not all of them. It makes up for most of the patch notes itself. So that is pretty good, that certain things will not block your progress anymore, or NPCs will be out of place and things will run a little bit more smoothly. But I'm not going to go through and read each and every one of them. What I want to get into is the open world, where there were a couple of significant things there, in my opinion. Collisions will no longer fail to stream in randomly during driving, which could lead to V driving into buildings and falling out of the world. Destructibles will no longer become indestructible after loading a save. So if you break something or blow something up, you won't be able to do that again after loading a save file. And then the last one here, fixed an issue where achievements for completing district activities were not always unlocked. Continuing on with some of the open world fixes. Fixed an issue where the urinary stream could still be visible after NPC stopped peeing and moved away from the spot. I've seen this one so many times. I'm glad that got fixed. It was really distracting. NPCs will no longer stay blocked on traffic lanes while in fear. NPC hit by a car will now immediately run in panic. That makes complete sense. Added different animation variations for pedestrians running away from a vehicle. So CD Projekt Red really upped its game on the terms of, if you want to run someone over, they're going to react properly. Instead of standing there like a bot and then grabbing their head, they're actually going to say, oh my god, I got to get out of here. There's a section for cinematic design, which also had some fixes. For me, the most notable one here was the second one on this list. Fixed an issue that could block progress if the player reached Wakako before Takamura in Down on the Street. Down on the Street is, in my opinion, one of the most consistently buggy quests in the game. You know, I see the most write-ins about it on comments or forums. I experienced it during my review process, and it's because it happens at a point in time where you have to wait for Takamura to call you. So you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to do a couple objectives. They want me to go out and explore the world, but you never get that call. So it gets really confusing what exactly is happening if you had to do something to trigger the actual progression of your quest. And then you find out it's just bugged. And so, yeah, they finally seem to have tackled that in its entirety, which is really good to see, because that was a major blocking point for a lot of people, myself included. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, they've shut off the Magica generators in Cyberpunk 2077. Take a look at this. Fixed multiple issues with disappearing or misplaced assets. Fixed multiple issues with assets floating in the air. Fixed multiple issues with assets appearing or changing appearance on site. The amount of floating assault rifles that I have looted from the floating corpses of enemies, I can't put a number on it, man. It's happened way too many times. Hopefully a thing in the past now. UI also got a bunch of fixes, from panels to localization efforts, visual changes for quest briefings, ads being displayed in the game, of course. So there's a lot there. I did a lot of digging for UI. There were a lot of fixes, generally speaking, for the UI. I didn't see a specific mentioning of it, but there were so many times in Cyberpunk 2077 where I'd go to loot a body and the panel on the right side of the screen for the loot would not go away, and that was really, really annoying. So I'm hoping that that is finally gone now in the general fixes. We'll see when I test it out some more, but just wanted to put that out there, my desire for it. They also said that they added an option to craft multiple items at once. This was something that was extremely needed. Various UI performance and stability improvements, epic and legendary loot dropping from enemies that are now better visible on the mini map. So a lot of times you'll miss that loot because maybe you just didn't see it and it's not properly displayed on the mini map, or that icon's not big enough. So now that's been fixed. For me personally, these are things that I have experienced through and through, but this is the section I think most of you are going to care about, which is stability. So it's got a bunch of them, from stability and performance of the engine and the rendering engine, reducing the number of crashes. This is also memory optimizations and improvements to shadows, shaders, physics, work spot system, spawn system, scene system, animation system, occlusion system, and facial animations. The mechanism for managing UI icons, multiple UI stability improvements and fixes related to UI crashes, various crash fixes in the settings menu, UI improvements in general, a performance drop on the controller button, and of course they say that this makes a bigger difference on the last generation consoles and lower performance machines. So for those of you who are on PC, there are specific fixes for you, or higher end PCs I should say, or next gen consoles. You'll still see some of these fixes, but these are mostly for the older systems which ran the game at a pathetic rate. What about PC though? Well, some interesting things have come in for that aspect too, where they have enabled ray tracing on AMD graphics, and the latest GPU drivers are of course required. They've added a lot more keyboard rebindings, which is kind of crazy to think about. I played it with a gamepad on PC, so some of the keyboard binding was a really major sticking issue here. They also said achievements will now work on the Epic Games Store, something that I'm really surprised didn't work in the first place. And then modding, added a new mod folder for loading modded archives. The modded archives can now be named in any way and go into the mod folder now. Having mod archives in the patch folder is no longer supported. Modding is going to be really significant going forward with Cyberpunk 2077, with how popular the game really still is. And I'm not saying it's a positive popularity, but it's still something in the minds of people. And I think as time goes on, modders will fix this game even more. We're going to see some ambitious mods with it. Maybe not on the level of BGS, but still, I think modding is going to be very big for Cyberpunk, so to see them continue to support it and put things like this in is good news. There are also console-specific improvements, such as for the PS4, Xbox, all of that stuff there that you can check out, but ultimately, that is it. That is all of the patch highlights here. Obviously, there are tons more. I read through all of them. To me, these were the ones that personally stood out. There were 500 plus changes here, so I think this was, as they advertised, a very big patch. The one thing I'm still hesitant about is, as always, sometimes these patches over time introduce their own sets of issues, because you plug one hole, another appears in its place. I've said that at least in 3 different Cyberpunk videos now, but it's worth reiterating here, because a lot of people, when I just cover patches and say like, hey, here's what's happening with the game, just that's it, here's what's happening, which is what I've done today, people will still be like, you're excited, you're so happy about this, how dare you? Like, dude, do we want the game to continue to suck? Is that what? Right, no. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I wrap this video up. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. I'll talk with all of you very soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.